Live from an undisclosed location in Las Vegas, it is Chad Graff from The Athletic making his return to the podcast. We're going to cover some East West Shrine Bowl. We're going to cover a Patriots coaching staff still quietly in flux, and not just titles that normally they hide until July, and then we don't really find out until they put out the media guide. But it's a big day here in Massachusetts, where the weather, oddly, is the same as it's been in Las Vegas, and that's because betting is finally official. It's open. And so I want to start in the obvious place for a man in Las Vegas. On a big day here in Massachusetts, Chad Graff goes to Encore or MGM or pick your casino. You land at Logan later today, I think. You go to one of those places. What's your first bet that you're putting down?
I live in Plainville, so that's going to be nice and easy, right at that Plain Ridge Casino out by Foxborough. I am a sucker for one particular thing, which is that this job has stripped me from a lot of fandom, but not yet my fandom for Nebraska football.
No.
Still care way too deeply about Nebraska football. Born into a Nebraska family. I was the first one not to go to Nebraska, but still care way too much about it. And around this time every year, I'll get on the phone with my dad, just catching up. And inevitably it turns to, I'm getting pretty optimistic about things this year. I'm liking the recruiting class. We're hearing good things about the quarterback. This is exciting. So I am, despite how poorly it went at the joint practices that we saw 6 months ago, I am all in on Matt Rule at Nebraska. I think it's going to go well. I'm hammering the over on Nebraska wins. I don't even know what it is yet, but it's going to go over. So I love that. I would like to potentially dabble in a little bit of golf. So I'm thinking Max Homa to win the Masters, something, get some decent odds on that. But if we had to look more immediately, I don't know about you, but I've really gone back and forth on this Super Bowl. Both on what would be a better story and who's going to win. Right now, I think I'm going Chiefs, but right after the game, I thought Eagles. A couple weeks for Mahomes' ankle to get better. I think I'm taking the Chiefs.
All right. Wow. So we're
all around. We're golf, college football. We got to hit the Super Bowl since that's coming up.
You have been waiting for this longer than anyone. It sounds like that's what this is getting at. You have been waiting for someone to ask you this question, and here it is. I did it. The floodgates have opened. I thought I did a betting podcast with Mike Manansky last week or 2 weeks ago. Here you are, ready to do another one and not letting me know. In all seriousness,
no, for a reason.
Yeah, right. If mobile betting is not open right now in Massachusetts, so that's going to have to wait a little bit. This podcast is also brought to you by Athletic Greens. Moving on from that, I mentioned you're in Las Vegas. You have been there for 4 days, each with a practice where the Patriots are coaching a bunch of college prospects on the West team. And there'll be a game on Thursday, and it'll be, I think, on the NFL Network or televised somewhere. And these are mostly day 2, early day 3, maybe late day 3 prospects. But the interesting part about the Patriots coaching staff being there is, A, it's the first time ever at the Shrine Bowl that NFL coaching staffs have been there, or the Patriots really have had an opportunity to be selected there or at the Senior Bowl. So they're coaching different positions. O'Brien is there in a quote-unquote supervisory role. So is Belichick, though you see him grabbing the shoulder pads of some defensive linemen, which isn't so, supervisory. But I want you to kind of set the scene for us, because we'll dive into more specifics. You're there for 4 days. You're watching, you're observing, you're talking to Troy Brown, who spoke after most of those practices. What have you learned? What does it look like?
It looks so different than whatever we're used to with the New England Patriots, to the point where go to the check-in table one day. It's all at the UNLV practice facility. And you check in, you get your credential, turn the corner, and it's just this outdoor football field, a practice field. And guys are on it, and there's just tons of people on the sidelines. And so I'm thinking, okay, these must all be scouts, executives, whomever, someone from the league. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I see bleachers, so that must be it. So I'm kind of meandering my way. Happen to bump into like a Viking scout that I somewhat know. So catching up with him, hey, what's going on? And finally at the end, I'd be like, hey, I know this is gonna be weird, but where am I supposed to stand, go? Like, I've never been here. I've never done one of these. And he was like, you don't know? I was like, no. He goes, you can walk onto the field if you want. You can go anywhere you want. You can stand next to me. You can stand next to the scouts. You're on the sideline. So
a little different than one Patriot place. Training camp.
One Patriot place, like cornered into a 5-yard space, elbow to elbow with everybody else, looking through binoculars. This was like you're standing on the 50 on the sideline, next to 6'6" players, and so it's so different in that respect. And just, a good chance for, if you want to do player interviews or Even just see, like, this is my first year doing the Patriots. I don't know that I, would have been able or watched many times Ross Douglas, going through his position. We get 10 or 15 minutes of practice. You're quickly seeing who's there, who's not there, taking a picture, a video of Mac Jones, seeing how his ankle looks, and then that's it, and you're out. So this was a chance kind of to see more of how they're operating too.
Which I think is so important, right? Because we, discuss the quality of coaching a lot, and a lot of the assessment, including on this podcast and things you've written about, are about what we see on Sundays. And obviously the most important part, you coach to win, and the things you do to affect winning or prevent your team from winning are things that we can grade and or see in our public. But most of the job, Monday through Saturday, is in those practices where we get in, see them stretch, and are told to leave. So now that you get that experience of who's a little bit more hands-on, how do you communicate, who seems to be developing guys, which you can only see so much in 4 days, is really interesting and valuable to, I think, apply that knowledge and background when you come back as we discuss guys like Ross Douglas, who you mentioned, who's wide receivers coach, not assistant wide receivers coach, but the same title as Troy Brown, who is the head coach this week, and Douglas is the offensive coordinator. And on the defensive side for this West team, the Patriots have co-defensive coordinators, Mike Pellegrino, who coaches corners, and then Brian Belichick, who coaches safety. So everyone's gotten a little bit of a bump up. Other coaches, Vinny Cincinnati, normally at the running backs, I think it was at wide receivers this week. Any of those coaches really quickly stand out, or someone maybe surprise you in the way that they went about their business, which is most important, the hands-on development, teaching, the coaching part of coaching?
There were a couple, and I think this one to me was a surprise, both for the fact that he's here and was coaching a position, in this case, coaching the running backs. Evan Rothstein, who had been billed as like the Ernie Adams for Matt Patricia. They were in Detroit together. Rothstein preceded Patricia in Detroit, but then got along, apparently, Detroit reporters would tell you, very well with Patricia. And then when Patricia came back to New England, followed him to New England. It seems, I think it's fair to say that Matt Patricia will not be returning to the Patriots. What his role eventually is, what his next job is, we'll see. But it was interesting to me that Rothstein was not just that he's going to stay as an offensive assistant, but that he was given a position group to coach. This is not a guy who has ever coached positions before. He's always been a research guy or a vague offensive assistant, what have you. So to see him coaching the running backs was interesting, especially since if the Patriots don't bring back Damian Harris, or frankly, even if they do, and they just want like that Ty Montgomery sort of player, this is a spot where I think they could be looking at a day 3 running back, and they had plenty of day 3 running backs to work with. So that's a meaningful role for him to be having and working with, and was around them at all times.
Rothstein's a really interesting name for the reasons that you mentioned. Not only his Patricia connection, does he stay behind if Patricia leaves, which is still, as far as I've heard, undecided, but his absence there obviously is notable. Nick Haley also was not there in Las Vegas, but Rothstein is someone who was more involved in the game planning part that I learned as the season went on than most people knew. Again, because he's in this nebulous kind of role, right? Like the Ernie Adams stuff faded away a little bit. He's assisting with the quarterbacks, but then he's designing a lot of the passing game in the red zone, which, as we know, was dreadful. So where does his value in there? And that's where I think some of the politics kind of seeps in. Who makes the calls? Is it Bill O'Brien or Bill Belichick? Where does he return? How does he return? Is TBD. I think that point is largely true, though, for the whole staff, because, again, they're interviewing offensive line coaches. Supposedly Ryan Wendell from the Bills came out, interviewed in Las Vegas. Adrian Clem had another interview with the Patriots. So this coaching staff is not set in stone yet. And a lot of people wonder who's going to be in what spot. Rothstein, Cam McCourt, Joe Judge, who was out there after the Shrine Bowl, said initially he wasn't going to be out there. But let's stay with Belichick and O'Brien for a second. What was their interaction like? How much was O'Brien interacting with the new assistants? Was he standing back? Was he hands-on? What'd you see from both of them?
Way, way, way more hands-on than I thought. Like this was all billed as, look, Troy Brown's going to get to be the head coach, and Rothstein's going to be with the running backs and whatever. And all of these guys are going to get to basically bump up a couple of levels, take on more responsibility than they usually do. And the big names, including Judge, O'Brien, Belichick, are just supervisory roles. And so I kind of thought that would mean, having never done one of these, not really knowing what to expect, I assume supervisory role meant like they're going to sit up on a perch on the rooftop of the UNLV facility and just look down and watch. And then O'Brien was standing and working with the quarterbacks like almost the entire time. And Bill, as some of the tweets have shown, is legitimately like grabbing the shoulder pads of these prospects. And no, I want your swim move to look like this or come up this gap or whatever. So it was way more hands-on. Even Judge, who I think it's noteworthy, was not just spending time with special teams, but was with the offense and was with quarterbacks and next to O'Brien and working with wide receivers. So they were all way more hands-on than I expected. They were at every practice except for the one on Monday morning when it was 45 degrees and raining. The supervisory role attendees perhaps said, Troy Brown, this is your real chance to really lead the guys while it's freezing out here. So good luck with that one. So we'll see. I was frankly very surprised. And I do think, and we can get into this later, but I do think that this is their chance to kind of have an advantage over a lot of teams with these day 3 picks. You're not getting an advantage coaching at the Shrine Bowl of first round guys. Like the best guy here is Zay Flowers from Boston College. Everybody's going to know him. Everybody's done their homework on him, watched it. He's going to be a top 50 pick, maybe a first rounder. So you're not getting a huge advantage by hanging out with him, seeing him first person. You are getting a big advantage on these guys who are, somewhere between a preferred undrafted free agent to 5th, 6th round pick. Like those are the guys that you can, I think, really get an advantage over the teams who are not here coaching.
I just want to go back a couple of minutes because it made me laugh inside for the folks who could tell on YouTube that I was not laughing, but just the idea of Bill O'Brien and Bill Belichick perched up, as you said, and looking down as if they were the old guys from the Muppets, just pointing at drills and laughing and roasting everyone from afar. Like I would thoroughly enjoy kind of the director's cut of the coaches tape of these practices with just their commentary back. Just maybe next year.
They were together almost the entire time, like constantly following each other around. O'Brien, when Belichick would go over to defensive linemen or stuff, O'Brien did tend to hang back more with quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, what have you. But O'Brien and Belichick were around each other a ton.
That's really interesting.
And interesting is like all these Alabama guys come out, which every year, of course, there's a dozen of them, and there are some here. Like it's not going to be a surprise if and probably when the Patriots draft Alabama guys, but I think it'll be especially telling if they draft offensive Alabama guys, just given how familiar O'Brien will be with those players.
So amid all of the coaching changes and pieces shuffling and promoting, that I talked about a little bit. And if you really want to know what everyone's job was, please look that up online. But I think it's important, because it's good experience for what's largely a young and or inexperienced staff to cross-train across positions. And the most important one that cross-trained was Ross Douglas. Again, offensive coordinator, first year coaching offense with the Patriots, second year on staff, and the first one was with the Bill Walsh Diversity Fellowship. He's not only as the offensive coordinator, he's coaching quarterbacks. He's not going to be coaching quarterbacks in 2023. That's what Bill O'Brien's doing. I mean, maybe he isn't as an assistant. That's a lot of trust in a 28-year-old guy who last year was hired, as I reported, the youngest position coach in the league. Now, Ross, who knows about his future, but I think it's important for O'Brien to watch him and Sinceri and Evan Rothstein as auditions as much as the players are in front of O'Brien and Belichick, because they're trying to decide, again, what the offensive staff is going to look like. And it's very much unsettled, not just the offensive staff, but the staff as a whole. We have reporting from your colleague, Jeff Howe, that Joe Judge will be back. It's just, if he's going to be back, I have a hard time believing it's going to be on offense, which means then he goes to special teams. Then you have another domino falling of Cam McCord, all of which to say there's a lot still that's unsettled. But did you see any of that where you could tell O'Brien might have been studying the assistants as much as the players? Because again, he's trying to determine with Belichick who he wants on the staff and where.
For sure. I mean, this is kind of, it was a foil to the Falcons staff in a little bit in terms of, as you mentioned, these are all auditions for a new offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien, who needs to put this staff together and is apparently interviewing candidates for his staff while the Falcons have rounded out their staff, similar position in that they just hired a new defensive coordinator. So it's a little bit of still getting to know you. And so Arthur Smith has told them, like, hey, I would need everybody out of the office, done working by dinner time, go get drinks together, eat a steak together, get to know each other, have some fun. That is not the case, perhaps unsurprisingly, with the Patriots.
I was going to say, God bless Arthur Smith. Yes.
Yes. Arthur Smith went to a concert with his wife on Saturday. Told everybody, like, enjoy. If your family comes out, go hang out with them. This is a fun thing. This is a showcase. We don't need to take this too seriously. I'm not going to say that one side is better than the other. That's for you to decide. But the Patriots' decision has been drastically different in terms of, it sounds like it's been, give me 12 hours on the Shrine Bowl, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., prep and practice, watching tape, figuring out what you're going to do. And then after that, I don't want you to go explore Las Vegas and, go see a cool show. Now it's time to put your Patriots hat on and start prepping for free agency. And we need to look at all of these players who are going to be free agents at your position. Tell me who you think is going to be good and not good. So the Patriots assistant coaches have not been wandering the strip with like a cool Fat Tuesday drink or something. This has been very, very much a business trip for them. And that, I think is primarily with Bill O'Brien too, of, as you mentioned, trying to figure out this staff, which, to go all the way back, I think is one of the main reasons that Bill O'Brien makes so much sense for this from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. He knows what it's like to work for Belichick, which until you actually do it, all coaches have long hours, but until you work for Belichick and see just how minimal your outside football hours are and your fun hours are, like, it's just, Keenan McCardell may have been great, but it would have been, I think, a bit of a wake-up call to realize, wait a second, we're going to this like all-star game showcase of day 3 prospects that's really not all that important, and you want me working 16 hours a day on that? Bill O'Brien
in
knows
Vegas?
that. In Vegas, of all places.
Opportunity cost is around every corner,
While our colleagues are, running up a nice tab on blank in the Falcons check.
Yeah. One last one, and then we'll pivot a little bit more to some of the players you see as fits, and then some bigger questions for the team. During the Combine, which is, we have the Senior Bowl going on now, but the Combine is the next big event on the NFL calendar as far as the entire league gets together. They drink, they gossip. There are players who are timed and tested and lift and blah, blah, blah. The most important stuff is all off the field in the bars and restaurants, for media included, frankly. How much of that went on at this event? Was there anything off the field where obviously our focus is what's on the field, but more importantly, there's stuff that's kind of going on besides the interviews that we talked about with Wendell and possibly Clem?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Perhaps it's good that it's dry January, not dry February, with the Combine coming up, and
yes,
just prep for that. And
can't confirm.
Yeah, exactly. This was a little bit different in terms of there were not that many general managers here. Like the top level people around the NFL are kind of going to the Senior Bowl, as much as the NFL is doing what it can to prop up the Shrine Bowl and make it a bigger deal. They want it to be kind of 1A, 1B with the Senior Bowl, even though right now it's viewed clearly by who is in attendance at each of those as the Senior Bowl is the more important one. The Shrine Bowl's day 3 guys. The Senior Bowl has some first and second round picks there. So it was not as much that. It was a lot more of networking from the scout side. Tons and tons of regional scouts here to meet with each other. And I think people might be a little bit surprised to know, and this goes on at every sport, so not just football, but there's a lot of notebook sharing among scouts from different organizations, from rival franchises, frankly, of like, hey, what do you see with that guy? Where do you have him graded? And it just is so counter to how you might think of it and as super competitive. But these are scouts who see each other all the time at these places. And there's a lot more getting a drink together on the strip. And, are you guys going to have any openings on your staff? What do you see from this player? So there's a little bit of that, but different from the Combine in that there weren't that many like super high level movers here. And then, as much as I kind of knock on Indianapolis from time to time, it does go to show how nice it is to have basically 3 bars that people go to all within walking distance, as opposed to the Strip having 1,000 bars just in one hotel on a 4-mile stretch. So it's a little bit more difficult to just run into people by happenstance. And then, of course, as we mentioned, with the Patriots hours that the coaching staff was keeping, they were 100% not hanging out at the Bellagio fountains and sipping a fun drink there. They were working the entire time, for better or worse.
Okay, so the Patriots officially had the most boring trip to Vegas ever taken. I hope that's not true for you, work aside, because you know what, you get 4 days in Vegas, including 2 days in the weekend. You got to make the most of it. It's funny though, because I mentioned off the top, Athletic Greens, one of the sponsors for this podcast. Want to take a second to talk about them now. Jim McBride of the Globe, according to Chad Graff of The Athletic. Jim takes this, so I can verify anyone coming back from Vegas needs to take a look at AG1, because I did a couple of months ago in the middle of the season to start, sleep better, have more energy as the Patriots season just kind of gets to be a slog. And what it is one scoop. You put it in a smoothie, a glass of water, a 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced ingredients, probiotic, and adaptogens, which of course you know what adaptogens are. And the best part is it's lifestyle friendly. Again, it could be water, it could be a smoothie, but it doesn't matter if you eat vegan, you're dairy free, gluten free, keto, paleo. 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, nasty chemicals, or anything artificial. Again, better sleep, recovery, mental clarity, and alertness, and it costs less than $3 a day. So right now, you can reclaim your health and arm your immune system, whether you're coming back from Vegas or not, with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. Take it easy, and Athletic Greens is going to make it easy for you with a 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D plus 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Just visit athleticgreens.com/garden. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/garden to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Okay, back to the field. Prospects. You mentioned Zay Flowers, Boston College receiver. Some talk, is he a day 1 guy? Is he early day 2? There's a long way to go with that. Again, I promise the draft content is coming on this podcast. I still need some time. Besides him, who do you see as Patriot fits when you were up close with all these guys for 4 or 5 practices?
So I admittedly spent a lot of time looking at receivers because I do think that is, while there's a lot of pressing questions, including offensive tackle and cornerback, to me, wide receivers is both the most fun to watch and figure out, but it's also just, frankly, I think the most pressing. You need to make a decision on Mac Jones and his 5th-year option after this upcoming season. You've given him a real offensive coordinator. Now the last step is you need to give him weapons. Just re-signing Jacoby Myers is not enough, and that is no given either. So back to the well you go, I think, for an early wide receiver, whether it's first round or beyond. I think you kind of have to come away with a wide receiver on day 1 or 2. So in that vein, Zay Flowers was the best one here. He didn't do a ton because he does not want to get hurt. He wants to be around the Patriots coaches and in the meetings, and by all accounts did very well, but he only practiced 1 time, and it was basically because every cornerback here wants to show that, in his words, they can shut him down. And so it's going to be a little extra grabbing and hand fighting and just play it safe. Don't get injured. So he was the best one here, but didn't do a whole lot. After that, I think a really interesting option is A.T. Perry from Wake Forest, a bigger body, which I think the Patriots could use. We don't know what's going to happen with Nelson. Well, we kind of know what's going to happen with Nelson Aguilar. He's probably going to sign elsewhere. I don't know that Devontae Parker is just a shoe-in to return. And so regardless, I do think that you could use a bigger body receiver. You've got ideally Tyquan Thornton developing as your downfield guy. You've got potentially, if he re-signs Jacoby Myers underneath, you could use more of a possession receiver. And I think that is what Perry provides. He's 6'5", but he's not like a stiff, can't run route 6'5". T. Higgins is too high of a compliment, but kind of a poor man's T. Higgins. So he jumped out. There's a Florida receiver, Justin Shorter, who had a couple of big plays. Troy Brown worked with a ton and was often with him and chest bumping him after some plays. Fun to see Troy Brown kind of bring back the Swift. He ran 40 yards downfield to go celebrate with him, and he looks like he could still return a punt if you needed him to.
Troy's jacked. Troy's ripped. Every time we talk to Troy, even over Zoom, I'm like, GD, I need to get back to the gym. Like, the man might be in better shape than he was at the end of his career. It's unbelievable.
It's insane. He's crazy. I'll give you, I guess, a couple more. Liberty receiver Demario Douglas, super small, shifty slot guy that I think you could use whether or not you resign Jacoby Myers. Like, if you do, great, have him learn behind him. If not, I think he's a guy who could develop into that role that the Patriots have been so good at and ran, frankly, so well when Bill O'Brien was last year with Wes Welker leading the league in receptions, targets, yards, whatever else he did. And then, we talked a little bit about the running backs. Minnesota running back Mohamed Ibrahim, who put up massive numbers in college. I was impressed with not just that, with his running style, which I think is well documented, playing in the Big Ten in cold weather and putting up tons of yards. He's got good hands and ran decent routes. And I don't know that he's like a true scat back that the Patriots may want, depending on if they choose that role and what happens with Montgomery. But somebody like that, I think, is interesting, almost in like a Ramondre Stevenson role of, good ball carrier, but this is a guy who could pass block and catch some passes too. I didn't spend a ton of time watching safety, but I don't know about you. That to me is safety and tight end are kind of like the positions to me that are super interesting as potential Patriots fits, that are not like on the same level as wide receiver, cornerback, offensive tackle, but spots that good teams would be looking at the future of that position, developing somebody to come in there, knowing, who knows what's going to happen with Jonnu Smith a year from now, or Hunter Henry this year or a year from now, or Adrian Phillips.
Let's stay with tight ends, because this ties into some of the guys that were there. And one of your other colleagues at The Athletic, Nate Tice, tweeted about Jack Coletto from Oregon State, who also played some fullback. And I took note of this because, as we both watched and knew last year, the Patriots got rid of the fullback position. This was a one-back offense in every single iteration, and they asked Jonnu Smith, can you pop back in the backfield for some lead runs or some split zone? And okay, that's fine. It doesn't count. But Coletto is a hybrid player that could bring back some of those two-back concepts. And your colleague Nate Tice from The Athletic brought up as someone who's versatile, had some ball skills, could unlock some more of that creativity. Not, a Kyle Juszczyk out in San Francisco, but something similar. Did Coletto pop to you at all?
A little bit. I think anybody who is in that role automatically gets paired to Kyle Juszczyk just because he's so good and got paid and was kind of the only one to do that. So I think teams would be wise to look for that. I think it will be telling if they go out and find a guy like that, of a little bit more of what Bill O'Brien is looking for. I do think whether it's him or somebody else, I don't know what you think, but you need another tight end. You've got two on the roster, so for sure need another one. But just knowing that the Jonnu Smith thing hasn't really worked out like you hoped when you signed him, next year is the year that you can more easily get out of that. This feels like a good opportunity to choose a day 3 tight end, somebody that you can develop. They're your third tight end this year, 4th or 5th round, something like that. And then if they play great or begin to develop, awesome. You've got your number 2 tight end next season. If they don't, no sweat. It was a 5th round pick. We'll go look for somebody else. So I really think that they'll be going that route. One oddity, I guess, is that was the only position for the Patriots that they did not assign a position coach. They just had them either work in with receivers or Bill O'Brien would pop by and help, but they didn't have a position coach for tight end, which is a little bit odd, perhaps just because they didn't have as many people on staff when you don't have an offensive line coach and a tight end coach maybe up in the air. Maybe it was a numbers thing. Maybe you can read more into it, but they did not have a tight ends coach here for coaching the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, and that comes back to Nick Caley, obviously the Patriots tight end. His contract is set to expire. Interviewed for the Jets offensive coordinator job. The Patriots job didn't get either of them. His future seems to be uncertain. He's 40 now. His name has been floated a lot, even on this podcast, by myself and other people. I'm not sure how much interest there is for a larger role. Obviously, those interviews are a good sign. But when you look at the production from that position the last few years, like you just talked about Jonnu Smith being a real downer, maybe he didn't want him on the roster or was involved in the free agency decision, because before Jonnu Smith got here, was heralded, including by yours truly, as this kind of underlying analytics, like the separation's really good. He breaks tackles. Yeah, he's never topped 500 yards in a season, but it's coming. Never did. Totally whiffed. So I don't know if that was more than just, hey, Nick's not going to come. We'll just figure it out while we're there. Or maybe that's a position like we talked about with offensive line that they may need to address moving forward. So I think it's a larger conversation later on, but I think it's interesting that they did opt not to slide anyone in there, because it's also a complicated position. But if you're one of those tight ends at the Shrine Bowl, you're like, I would like to be coached. I would not like to be treated as a receiver or a part-time tight end. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, it was an interesting situation because they would basically either be an offensive lineman or a wide receiver, and there wasn't much. Just, hey, you do your own thing here, and it's just a spot that fascinates me, along with safety for the Patriots this offseason. So
Yeah. You mentioned
we'll see what they
safety.
do.
Those decisions, I think, starts with Devin McCourty, right? Does he retire? Does he not? Even if he does, I don't think he comes back and plays 98% of the defensive snaps like we've become accustomed to. They were limiting him a little bit towards the end of the year, but he could re-sign for 1 year. They could bring back Jabril Peppers, who I think proved he was a real fit, even as someone who had the experience in Patrick Graham's system in New York, and obviously he's built like a box safety. I mean, he's built like a box. Forget the safety part. He's absolutely rocked up. But we'll save that for another day. I want to get into one more question just for you, and then we'll do mailbag stuff. Your personal takeaway. First year in the Patriots beat, we already hit on some differences. They go to Vegas, they don't party. Obviously, we see 5 seconds of practice. I don't want any of this 0.0% to come off as complaining about it. I'm just asking for you to illuminate folks on your experience in Minnesota, both covering the NFL and NHL, and what it was like here in New England.
I would say two things that are going to sound kind of competing and like they couldn't be true. I think the first thing that was a takeaway just from having done this for one full season now is a locker room's a locker room. Like, it doesn't matter if it's the Patriots with closely guarded secrets or, the Arizona Cardinals without a ton of media people there. Like, the guys are football players. They've been several places. That was not a big change to me. I was a little bit worried of, I know players in the Vikings locker room, is it going to be so different now going to the Patriots, where is Bill Belichick going to have told everybody, do not talk a certain way? And sure, there's a little bit of that, but by and large, you can go up to these guys and do your interviews and tell their stories and write features on them. And that is not different. What is drastically different, and I know that people know this and I knew this, but I don't think I knew this to quite this level. I came from Minnesota, where they had just switched out Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, brought in Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell. And their buzzword that became something that we kind of frankly mocked was collaboration. Everything was, every coach is going to have a say in this. Every scout is going to have a say in this. We're going to listen to analytics. We're going to listen to our scouts. We're going to take everybody's opinion, blend it together, and that's how we're going to come to decisions. And to say that is the drastic polar opposite of the Patriots, I think would even be doing it unjustly. I did not realize quite to the level that Bill Belichick has control over every single tiny thing, down to, it wouldn't surprise me, like the flowers in front of Gillette Stadium. And the fact that he lords over all of that, and it's very singular. So I went from like super collaboration, everybody gets a say, to this is my decision and my way, and I don't care if it makes other people miserable, and I don't care if I come off as a jackass or mean. This is how I am doing it. Great, you want to stay? Awesome, you can stay, but this is how we're doing it. And if you don't want to stay, goodbye, the door is right there. So seeing just to the level that I think Belichick works his employees and is so singularly making decisions, frankly, was a bit surprising, even knowing his reputation coming in.
Yeah, which of course makes, the last few weeks so interesting, right? How much of this is a tug and pull negotiation with the Crafts that just never would have happened in the first place. But when you're 25 and 26 over the last 3 years, there needs to be changes. And that's something he said himself in that final press conference. They need to be better. It starts with him, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, Bill O'Brien having more input in the offensive staff, something that might not have happened before. But he's a guy with head coaching experience, obviously an offensive coordinator in multiple spots. Like, I don't think he's loosening the reins. I think he's understanding that one man can't have all the answers, and obviously has in the last few years. And that's also been one of his strengths, though, is identifying talent in the coaching ranks and knowing how to delegate, to people around you who have earned it. Bill O'Brien's certainly done that. You look at the rest of the staff, that's where most of the problems were, which obviously trace back to him. But enough on last year. Moving forward, we have 3 mailbag questions. We'll get through them quickly, all via Twitter. Let's lead off with Marco. You talked about this actually right off the top. Marco wants to know, quote, maybe it's wishful thinking, but with the coaches having such a close look at the prospects, are your hopes / expectations for this year's draft class much higher than in the past? You mentioned these are mostly day 2, day 3 guys. Do you think there's a real tangible benefit there? Because as you mentioned, there are a ton of different scouts standing on the sideline as well.
I do think that there is a benefit. I just think it's a marginal benefit that has to do with your 5th, 6th, 7th round picks. To kind of put it in perspective, I was reminded by that Vikings scout. The Vikings had this. They were there. I didn't go to it, but they coached the Shrine Bowl in 2019. It's mostly day 3 picks, but they had 2 6th-round selections that year. Oli Udo was one of them who they coached at the Shrine Bowl, and Armin Watts was the other one who they coached at the Shrine Bowl, and felt really good about those selections because their coaches had advocated for them, worked for them in the position room, said, hey, this guy is taking the coaching. He's raw. He's a 6th or 7th round pick for a reason, but we think that there's a lot more to get out of this guy than perhaps other teams are realizing just based on their traits and college production. I would say that they hit on both of those 6th-round picks. They didn't turn into, Pro Bowlers, but if you're getting multi-year production and occasional starts from your 6th-round picks, as those 2 6th-round picks turned into, that's probably a win. So I think there's a definite advantage, and it helps. It's just, I think it boosts your chances of a successful 6th or 7th round pick from very low to pretty low. So it's not something that I think nails their 1st round pick and means the draft class is going to be like that Kyle Duggar one.
But you know what? First of all, that's a tremendous example and just experience to cite because, the staff was there. This is how it helped. This is how it translated. And these are the benefits. Not only just this is what I think, but it happened with the 29 Vikings. You're married. I'm engaged. If we were to go back out and you could have that little help or bump or 2 days with someone that increase your chances of someone that you covet from pretty low to low, you're taking that. Absolutely. I will take the marginal benefit and bump and percentage chances of landing this girl, this prospect or whatever it is. So Marco, be satisfied. I'm from a distance in agreement with Chad, defer to his experience and time there. But yeah, pretty little low, especially in those later rounds. You'll take it. All right. Dave on Twitter wants to know, what will Judge's role be next season and why is he still here? It's a little mean. And why does it appear that Cam McCord is still running special teams? I got the Judge blowback. There were a lot of things in the story I published last week that had to deal with his coaching style. His presence in meetings did not go over well. I, again, want to remind people, I think this coaching staff is in flux. The titles, the roles have not been nailed down. If they're not able to hire, say, an offensive line coach is the way they want to, or a tight ends coach if Nick Caley leaves, there are still so many moving parts that I think there's a world in which Joe Judge goes to special teams and for whatever reason they're slow playing that, or maybe he works into an assistant tight ends coach or an assistant receivers coach or some other support role in offense where he's not the lead coach overstepping and under delivering. So we can't say for certain unless you have brand new reporting that you should probably just run to The Athletic and write about instead of saying on my podcast. But there are things that are still in motion. And Judge will be back, as we know from Jeff Howe.
The other part of this that's interesting to me as I was kind of watching him, and Cam was completely running the show with special teams, is what, and I don't know the answer to this, but was just kind of thinking about it, is what does Joe Judge envision 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I would imagine, knowing these coaches and that they all have big egos and all think that they should be the ones running the ship, that he probably wants to be a head coach again. And he probably feels like he's learned a lot from the poor results in New York with the Giants. And I wonder if he thinks, if I want to be a head coach again, I don't know that going back to being the special teams coach for Bill Belichick is his best route to one day becoming a head coach again, or if it is more to go a traditional route, be a tight ends coach and then get promoted to offensive line coach, and then get promoted to quarterback coach, and then get promoted to offensive coordinator and work your way up as so many do and have in that sense. And yet, of course, even if he says, hey, that's the route I want to go, it doesn't mean that Belichick has to grant that.
Right.
At the end of the day, as discussed, Belichick could, if he wanted to, say, screw you, you're the tight ends coach, or you're not, or you're the special teams coach, or you're nothing. We have mentioned that he is singularly making decisions, so it will come down to that. But that's the part of me that wonders, what does Joe Judge want and how much would he advocate for himself if he didn't want to do special teams? I don't know if that's the case, but that's just something I was thinking about as he hung out with the offense this week.
Yeah, it's his future is certainly very murky. And I think given that his stock was low when the Patriots brought him back and made him quarterback's coach, obviously a big favor and a lot of trust from Belichick, who thinks very highly of him. was not the right role or the fit with the player, the room, the position, all of it went bad. So his stock has still continued to go down. And I think when you're at that point, it's not a matter of, okay, what does the top of the ladder look like, or how can I get out of this hole? It's how can I take one step forward as opposed to continuing to slide back down and deeper into that hole, which is where he is, which isn't to say a bad job, a bad position. You have a job in the NFL, that's a good job to have. It's well paying. He's still working in and around football. Just if he's coming back to New England and clearly failed last year, like, I don't know where else he could go. And at this point, you just have to accept whatever role that Belichick gives you. Thankfully, Bill still thinks highly of Joe. And I think Joe has plenty of time if he wants to eventually work his way back up to being a head coach. It's just nothing you can really think about now because there's just no immediate path to that, or even the 5-year plan that you laid out. Last one from Jim on Twitter. Should the Patriots re-sign Jacoby Myers or trade for a wide receiver? If you do want them to trade, who would you target? I've covered this, wrote about it. Names: Jerry Jeudy, Keenan Allen, Hopkins is out there. That seems less likely now with Bill O'Brien on board. T. Higgins, people have thrown out. So do you resign Jacoby? This is obviously a matter of price, but let's say it's 12, 13 million to some project. And then if not, are you trading for someone?
12, 13 million, I definitely resign it. If it gets to 15, 16 with tons of guaranteed money, that's when I would pump the brakes. But I think the goal should be, yes, re-sign him. Would think that it would make a ton of sense if you can go the trade route for Jeudy or Higgins. I'm super skeptical on Higgins. I get that everybody's like, you're going to have to pay. Yeah. Joe and Jamar, they're on the doorstep of a Super Bowl. You cross that bridge when you absolutely have to, and not a second before. Squeeze out every bit of this window as you can if you're the Bengals. So I'm skeptical that you could get him. But if you get Jeudy, I think you sign up for that, make that happen. I think the more likely route is not a trade, but yes to re-signing Jacoby Myers and then drafting somebody in the first or second round. And then you hope that Tyquan Thornton has taken some meaningful steps this offseason and is going to have some sort of year 2 boost. And if that's the case, then perhaps you start to feel better. But it's a position that I think very badly needs an upgrade, and yet unfortunately does not have a lot of easy answers just because of how bad the free agency wide receiver class looks like it's going to be, as I think Patriots fans have known for 6 months now.
Yeah, and I keep stressing this for whenever it comes about. It should be, second week of March, and you find out about Jacoby Myers. Does he stay? Does he go? Just keep price in mind. Again, this is what it comes down to. The Patriots, of course, would love to have Jacoby Myers, model citizen, leading receiver for 3 consecutive seasons. Guy can play inside now, serviceable. Just we'll find out how much in the friend zone he is with NFL executive versus 1 or 2 that might fall for him because of the production of the guy he is in the locker room, or they have the money, or just it's an ex-Patriot staff out there, whatever it might be. And the price is going to determine whether he comes back or not. I believe he wants to be here. He's on the record saying that. If they can come close to market value and still be able to add weapons around him, I think they do it.
The X factor, just as you mentioned, is what if some team like the Chicago Bears that has more money than they know what to do with, needs wide receivers, like, yeah, we'll throw tons of money at you. We don't care. We have unlimited money, a rookie contract quarterback. We just need weapons for this guy. Like, come here and we'll give you $4 million more a year than whatever the Patriots would offer. That is kind of the X factor. And then I really don't know what you do if you don't re-sign him, because things get pretty bleak fast, and all of a sudden you're really throwing out some high draft picks in a trade, because I think you start to get a little bit desperate.
Yeah, and then you're down to Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, and Tyquan Thornton under contract, and that's it. So, yeah, in that case, I think they definitely draft a receiver. But as mentioned, plenty of time left for the draft, plenty of time to have you, Chad, back. You got a flight to go catch. Thank you to Athletic Greens, Commap, sponsors, as always, for supporting this podcast, as well as Chad. You survived Vegas. It sounded like just a step above the Patriots experience in Vegas, but you'll be back. The Patriots will be back next year, so we'll have a little more exciting time next time.
Perfect. I'm going to go have my Athletic Greens and recover and survive this somehow.
Thanks, my guy. For more, check out the full episode of the Pats Interference Podcast and CLNS Media's Patriots Press Pass YouTube page, or listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Pats Interference Podcast is powered by Athletic Greens. Build a foundation for better health with AG1.